Hello, my name's Helen Millar. Welcome to my channel. This is Head to Heart Living, how to live a life less from fear and more from love. And I'm going to be talking today about ADHD, ADD. I'm loads of videos about this subject because there's been a massive increase in awareness about how it presents differently in adults and in women than it does in teenagers. And I'm going to explain a little bit, or children, I'm going to explain a little bit about why. I've got a seal directly in front of me in the window, and I was swimming a moment ago with it, saying hello. I'm going to be talking to you about ADHD and understanding it from my personal experience, my resistance to diagnosing it and any form of labels, and why I actually feel that we need to move beyond labels, but also why I'm making this video and why I'm doing work with people and workshops and collaborations around addressing this topic. And also I want to share today specifically about why I think it's potentially seen as being on the increase or the rise beyond pharmaceutical medication being sold around it. And it's linked to spirituality and this increased awakening on the planet. So if this resonates with you, do like, subscribe to the channel and share this video with anybody that you feel is struggling with a diagnosis, feels they might have it, or is demonstrating or experiencing symptoms around ADD and ADHD. So about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I was having coffee with a friend, quite a new friend, and she was saying, I've just been diagnosed with ADHD. And my inner thoughts were, why do you need a diagnosis? That's just ticking another label, another box. We all learn differently. We all experience the world differently. This is just a new fashion. It's a new fad. It's a new way for pharmaceuticals to make more money out of us. That was what my inner monologue was. I gave her compassion and held space and listened to her, but that's what I thought, right? And then as she was talking about it, I thought, well, that sounds like me. That sounds like me. Oh, I bet I've got it as well. Oh, well, I don't need to go through all of this, right? Thanks to the thumbs up, those who are joining me live. And also, if you're watching replay, please put in the comments your thoughts as we go through. I really enjoy reading people's responses. Whether you agree with me or not, you can leave what you don't, as with anything. This is my opinion, right? My experience. So that was my opinion a couple of years ago. Then I had, as some of you know, had quite a big life change. I used to live in Zone 1 in the centre of London all my life. And then in 2021, the beginning of, I moved down to live by the sea, somewhere I'd never been before. I didn't know anybody. And I was, it's in the middle of lockdown. It was a really isolated time. And I changed my business at that point. And it was all these life changes happening for me. And I found my workaholism dissipated. I found my ability to focus and be productive went out the window. And I found that I was becoming more and more sort of fractious and incoherent in my ability to be productive and function and get stuff out in the world, having been a highly sort of functioning workaholic for most of my life. Now, what I understand, this in this last week, and this is one of the reasons why this video is happening today. In this last week, I found my ADHD symptoms going through the roof. And I was getting a few days ago, I was really getting so fed up with myself and being like the flat's a mess. I've got piles of stuff there. I've got all these different projects on the boil. Why can't I just complete any of them? I was just getting really what's wrong with me moments. And actually, it's like, come on, Helen, you have experienced a lot of trauma in your life. We all have, especially the last 2 years, really activating a lot of deep trauma in us. My body used to have narcolepsy and would drop down unconscious in the middle of speaking to people, like traveling, I'd just pass out. And I was heavily medicated with pharmaceuticals for that. That's why I no longer, or I generally don't turn to pharmaceuticals first, because the pharmaceuticals just suppressed it and caused a whole load of other problems and didn't heal it. I healed it when I started working shamanically. So, and then I understood through my shamanic and healing journey, like that was trauma in my body that my body wasn't able to process. So it was just pulling the plug and, pulling me out of reality in order to not re-traumatize myself. Now, ADHD, I believe, is how my body is then processing trauma when I get too in my head and not enough in my body. And that's where my wiring becomes slightly different. So my approach of dealing with my ADHD, because I've chosen not to go with the pharmaceutical route because of my opinion of the pharmaceutical industry, but also the research I've done in the fact that it's a stimulation that's short-lived, a bit like how they try to medicate narcolepsy, which is essentially giving you speed so you don't fall asleep, and and but all personal choice. And so actually, what can I constantly do to regulate and release and have compassion with the trauma that that I understand is manifesting in ADHD symptoms? So that's my overall. Trevor, thanks for sound now. Great. That is my overall understanding in a nutshell of ADHD. Now, have the journey between where I am now and where I was a couple of years ago, internally being quite resistant to my friend's diagnosis, was when I moved down here and I was by the sea, and I suddenly found that I couldn't function in the same way that I used to. Part of it was because I was taking myself out of a highly charged environment to be by the sea, because my higher self was guiding me that, like, now is the time to do some deep healing. I just lost my mom, my relationship, various other things that I needed to process, and deeper levels of stuff that I was now ready to process from childhood, etc. And so this started to manifest itself with ADHD, lack of focus, inability to, complete things, being highly creative, not very great at finishing. But then what I got really interested by was these, like, when I started to research it a bit more, was these things like that I thought that I that I didn't realize. Now, you could be quite condescending and be like, yeah, well, then you can call anything ADHD. But that there are common traits, because they've made it onto, lists and diagnosis, that I just thought was all weird parts of me and things that I've had for donkey's years. So the fact that I come out of the kitchen and I realize that I've left half the kitchen cupboard doors open, and the fact that I seem to have an inability to cue, like it's almost like my brain doesn't register the cue. Like I walk to the front and then someone goes, oh, we're queuing, and then I get a bit mortified because I'm like, oh God, I didn't mean to push in. So I don't clock the queue until someone tells me there's a queue, or like getting on a train. Like I just go to get on the train and don't kind of clock the people around me. It's something that I've had to get, like, once you have the awareness that it's a problem and that's what your brain's doing, I can then modify my behavior so I'm not pushing in front of people. But what may be perceived as being incredibly rude is actually some slightly like loop missing, or, change in the way that I'm processing that information. And, there's all sorts of other things that I won't, there's loads of videos about YouTube about all the different ways that ADHD can manifest. The reason that it's suddenly on the increase, or seemed to be, is that in the 80s, there was a tiny piece, like it was done on about 20 people, 20 teenagers, about who had ADHD. And, that kind of, what I always thought ADHD was like kids not being able to sit still in school, like chewing the window, throwing pens at people. Like that was my shouting. Like that was my idea of ADHD. So of course I never thought I had it, because I haven't chewed any windows recently. But this research basically, because of hormonal changes, the way it displays, and essentially the hyperactivity often drops out, and that's why it becomes ADD when you get into adulthood. And so this is why the adults weren't being diagnosed, or suddenly they were saying, oh, your kid's cured. And it wasn't the cure. It was this tiny piece of research that suddenly made it into the mainstream narrative about a lot of mental health diagnoses. A lot of things are based on a tiny amount of research that are just pushed. And we're not really dealing then with the deeper underlying causes, trauma. I think pretty much all mental health conditions are trauma playing out in different frequencies, different, ways, for different reasons. So, and we healed, if you look at the work of Gabor Mate, I just take my hat off to him because he's done so much groundbreaking work in these fields. So if you want to go further, check out Gabor Mate. So this sudden sort of realization in recent years, I think, is because the lockdowns, meant that lots of people got off their hamster wheel and ADHD symptoms started to display, because then people also had the time to kind of look into this and why they weren't functioning in the way they normally were, because there was, trauma was being reactivated or instigated from the processes. In America, apparently it is overdiagnosed, but they are much quicker to push pharmaceuticals in that country. So, they can look at the whole link between income and profit and the way that illness is dealt with in the States. We're getting that way much more in this country, but it's actually supposedly underdiagnosed in this country. Not surprising when you look at the waiting list and the way the NHS has been defunded and blah, 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 the politics of all of that. But I don't think you need a diagnosis in order to work on healing and working on understanding and working with your ADD, ADHD. And it was exactly 11:11 when I clocked the clock then. So, and you can eye roll at that because I do it. But these little moments remind you that we're all connected and the universe is magical and we're just having a strange human experience. And in this strange human experience, I keep leaving kitchen cupboards open and half-finished projects everywhere. But why I believe this is a superpower and why I'm running a workshop in London with an amazing collaborator who also has ADHD is because this period in time, this awakening, this ascension, this mass shift on the planet in consciousness, where a lot of us who maybe are sitting at the front seats of the roller coaster, who are aware that these changes are happening. I mean, we're all on the roller coaster. Some of us are just to get a bit more of adrenaline about it because we know what the hell's going on, or at least some of what the hell's going on. We are spearheading, without being egotistical about it, but we are the people who have chosen maybe to, start doing the groundwork of the new world and creating the new way of being on this planet in line with the energies as they change. And consequently, we are being asked, and not even asked, but we're going to have to change the way that we play with this world, the way that we interact with each other, the way that we go about creating and looking after ourselves and nurturing ourselves. And we are and part of this shift is one, bringing into balance the masculine and feminine energies in ourselves and consequently in the planet. And the feminine energy is so much more about nurturing and self-care. It's not about popping pills to get over, to suppress illness and rock, and still clocking in a 20-hour day. It's not about downing monster drinks or, 17 coffees in a day in order to do the thing, overachieve, like having I'm so stressed as like a hashtag slogan badge of honor. Like it's about getting enough sleep, eating organic, prioritizing your self-care, keeping space in your diary. Maybe if you're a woman who menstruates, like following your natural cycle, like living in much more in nature's principles, understanding that you need time to decompress and not to overstimulate yourself constantly so that you're keeping your body in a traumatized state. All of these things are part of bringing yourself into balance and understanding feminine principles, which is essentially really, really listening and respecting your body, coming back to the heart's wisdom, not the mind's ego of do more, achieve more, judge me by how much money or how many numbers I've got or followers or all of that very like masculine, head-driven achievement stuff, but coming back here. And one of the ways that I find like really magical and empowering, and so the ADHD becomes a gift of creativity and multitasking, and is by listening to my body and making space for that creativity to flourish and emerge, and compassion with myself rather than comparison with others or how I used to be. as a, a way to limit myself, because that doesn't help anything. And the to talk about the astrological movement, we're coming out of the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius, and the age of Pisces, according to shamanic culture, is triangular structure. It's top down, hierarchical, pyramid orientated ways of living. Like, it's a job for life, it's a partner for life, it's it's climbing the corporate ladder, it's smashing the glass ceiling, it's aiming for that top over other people. And consequently, that's a very laser one way of focusing, way of being. Whereas the age of Pisces, the age of Aquarius, which is what we're moving into, is represented by the circle and overlapping circles. It is about community. It is about realizing that we are not separate from the environment. We're not separate from each other. It is the understanding, like, we are much, much more interconnected, but through technology, through, as we evolve our consciousness, seals like waving, as we expand our consciousness, our ability to be much more intuitive, telepathic, clairsentient, clairaudient, all of these skills that we're becoming having more ownership of as we expand and increase our frequency. In the same way that animals can hear and see in a much broader spectrum than we can, all of that is coming much more online for us. Some people at different rates, but it is our trajectory that we are all on. And so these overlapping circles, if you know your sacred geometry, it's the circle of life. We are becoming much more in alignment with life, in alignment with love, in coherence. And this is these overlapping circles. And if you think about your ADHD, it's like you're not just focusing in one way, you're focusing in many directions at once. And so for me, what's a really exciting realization is that ADD, ADHD is actually a much more future focused, in alignment way of being and operating than this very linear way, although much of the world still operates in that space. So it isn't sort of planning your entire year ahead, but seeing how you feel in the moment, dropping in, calling things much nearer to the time, following intuition, like, actually having the, kindness to yourself to actually change your plans if needs be, and do with where you feel you need to be in any given moment, rather than doing a lot of stuff out of obligation or habit or routine or patterning that actually confines your ability to be an expansive, growing, conscious member of society and yourself. So, hope that has maybe helped a few people or lit a few light bulbs or set some things in motion. On the 2nd of October, as I mentioned, I'm running this retreat day in South London in the most beautiful lodge space in the middle of some woods with an amazing collaborator who is a breath worker. She is a counselor. She has ADHD. She is I would say I'm a ceremonialist, and she holds ceremony for people who are getting married and things like that. She does that thing with the certification. The word has escaped me. And she is a Shakti movement practitioner. So together we are running a day. There's no ceremony. Well, you're not going to get married if you turn up, essentially. But that is part of her eclectic mix, right? ADHD people often have more than one thing that they do with their life or their time. I am bringing cacao ceremony and satsang and astrology and the sharing and movement practices. And together we have this day of moving beyond the labels with the ADHD, whether you're diagnosed or self-diagnosed, but moving into the body. It's a space for total deep connection with other people who get you. It's going to be a hive mind of sharing tips and practices and deep, nurturing, nourishing, joyous, deep feminine space. We're providing beautiful lunch. It's going to be really magical. And the early bird closes on Saturday. So you've got 4 days left if you're hearing this. And tickets are available up until the 2nd. It's happening on the 2nd. So you want to book before then to make sure you get a space. It's in London. And jump on the mailing list if this is of interest to you, if you can't make it, because if we continue to do more, you'll be the first to hear. All right, lovely people. I also have my trees workshop teaching you to talk to trees that I'm running this weekend in Hampstead Heath, also in London. And this afternoon, if anybody, and this evening, I have 2 events for the equinox happening. So all of these are on my website. Sending you hearthealer.co.uk if you're listening, hearthealer.co.uk. Thank you so much for being here. It's an absolute pleasure to connect. Thank you for all the people who are here live. If this has resonated, please drop a thumbs up, please drop a comment, and share to anybody that you feel would benefit from this content, who maybe feels a little bit alone, is overwhelmed, who's really struggling perhaps with aspects of their mental health or their functioning, their cognitive functioning, their ability to get stuff done. Maybe somebody who's had recent trauma that's unpacking that this is actually a way of realizing, it doesn't have to be something that you beat yourself up with. Okay. All right. Big love. See you all soon.